close the link in the chain of our exploration into the inward and the outward and connectivity, there's a question that needs to be asked. But first, there's that story about the man who heard that Li Tzu could float on clouds and ride the wind. So he sought out Li Tzu to ask him to become his teacher. Now, when he came into the presence of Li Tzu, he badgered him every day to begin teaching him. But Li Tzu ignored him, so that the man became frustrated and he left. But when he went back to his home, he realized that he had had expectations and impatience. So he decided to return to Li Tzu to ask him again to teach him how to float on the clouds and ride the wind. But Li Tzu demanded of him, "Why did you come and then go and then come again?" And the man explained that when he went back to his home, he realized that he had had expectation and the frustration. And so he decided to come back and seek again for Li Tzu to be his teacher. And Li Tzu said, "Well, I thought you were an intelligent man, but I realize now you're stupid. Listen," he said, "when I went to my master, Old Chang, and asked him to be my teacher, and to ask Wen Tzu to be my friend, that was when I decided to discipline my mind and cultivate my body. But I was too afraid to speak to Old Chang about right and wrong and good and bad. So he ignored me. But after 3 years, I began to speak freely of good and bad, and right and wrong." And that's when Old Chang smiled at me. After another 7 years, I found that I could no longer speak of right and wrong, good and bad, but rather of yin and yang. And that's when Old Chang called me my son. It was another 5 years before I could no longer speak of yin and yang, but rather of heaven and earth, the heaven that reveals existence and the earth that nurtures the seed of awareness. And that's when Old Chang invited me to sit beside him. After some time, I realized that I could no longer call Old Chang my teacher or Wen Tzu my friend. And that's when I realized that I could no longer differentiate between the inward and the outward. After this, I began to feel light in my body, and my body as light. I began to feel as though I were floating on clouds and riding the wind, but I did not know whether it was the clouds floating on me or the wind riding me. There was no longer any difference between the inner and the outer. Heaven and earth played freely within my being. When you came to me with your expectations and your anticipation, how could it be that you could find your ability to float on the clouds and ride the wind? Of course, the man went back to his house and began to cultivate his body and discipline his mind. So the question that's posed to us encloses the link of our exploration is, what for you does it mean to float on the clouds and ride the wind? What does it mean to float on the clouds and ride the wind?
Is the spirit